Good day guys and welcome to today's tutorial. Now in today's tutorial we're going to be looking at the importance of wires, copper wires, or yeah, wires that we use in actually making our installations, our electrical installation, a complete wiring size for wiring. So red wires are used for phases, black wires for neutral, and green wires for earthing. Now we're familiar with this, but how do we know which um type of copper wire and at what diameter is to be used for our various installations? Stay tuned and you're going to learn a lot from this video. So lightning and fans, these are basically lightning circuits. So what we basically use for lightning circuit are usually 1 mm or sometimes 1.5 mm. However, but however, there is a variation based on the input power that determines the amount or the diameter of which of the length of the thickness of the cable which you're going to be using. Now if you're using if you have a power of about 250 watt, you expect it to use 0.5 millimeter cable, copper cable. It then varies continuously depending on the power rating. So the power rating determines what diameter of a cable you then use for your circuitry or your installation. Now if you look at it, these are varieties of power ranges ranging from 250 to 750 at different range and different diameters. However, the most standard one, of which all have agreed on and mostly used, is 1 millimeter for lightning and fan. When we say lightning, lights and fan are basic lightning circuits. So you use 1.5 or a 1 millimeter. Mostly accepted 1.5. Now, our major appliances or domestic appliances at home, such as our TVs, these are a list of power ranges, power variations for it. You could take your time to actually look at the video and make a pause and go through them. I don't want to actually go into more details of that. So while loops from one circuit board to another, what this simply means is when you want to actually make a loop, you want to make a branch or some kind of connection to connect somewhere between two different switches, or perhaps two different two different switches. You use a 1 mm. It's still part of the lightning. The switches are still part of the lightning. So you use 1 mm or 1.5 mm at these switching points depending on the variety of or the variation of the power. For 500 watts you have 1 millimeter, 1 square meter. For 700 you have 1.5, and for 2000 you have 2.5. Now 2.5, you see, it's usually for our heaters, our socket outlets mostly are the ones that you use 2.5 for, because it's expected that you might likely want to connect a heater, a kettle, and most or an iron and or a freezer. That's why most of our sockets are basically 2.5 mm. So in a distribution board, likewise in a distribution board, you want to use the exact diameter of copper cable that will actually give you a nice precision and actually minimize the risks of fire outbreaks or burns. So you want to use the exact and right prescription. So for about 1000 watt, you use a 5.5 mm. Around 2000 watt, you use 2.5 mm. And around 5000 watt, you use 4.5 mm. Now 5000 watt usually is basically used for AC appliances. That's why you use 4 mm, because most AC appliances are within the range of 5000 and above. So you use that 4 mm for AC based appliances, sockets, outlets for AC. So when you're talking about power circuits for your irons, your heater, your dispensers, and even your laundry sets, it's advisable to use a very nice cable, copper cable, that would actually withstand the strength of time, as these things are being powered on day by day. So you find out that the wattage consumption of some uh, irons may be around 1500 watts or 4000 watts, depending on the architecture. So you use these variations. Wiring size for home appliances. So some basic appliances such as our heater, you could use 1.5 mm. For ACs, you can use 1.5 ton. You could use based on actually the capacity. You could use 2.5 mm. For 2 ton, you could use 4 mm. And these variations keeps going on and on depending on the kind of materials that you might likely be using. So it is necessary and very, very important that when you want to make certain installations at domestic homes or industrial places, you take into account these cable variations in terms of diameter and how useful they are from level to level. How useful they are at different stage, say from the meter to distribution boards or distribution board to the main load. You want to be very, very careful about the kind of cables you use. Now, on standards, they usually use 4 mm for AC sets, for AC socket outlets, um, and so on like that. So basically, we have those three types of wiring electrical. We have the neutral wire. Now, for your neutral cabling, you you might want to use a 1.5 mm for neutral lines for on your neutral bars. Maybe your neutrals can all be 1.5 mm, but depending on the wattage, like I said. So if you are talking about if you're trying to give a neutral to a socket outlet, you should use around about 2.5 and above. Now, as well as earthing consideration, when you are earthing a switch, say for example, you could use 1.5 mm or 1 mm. A main distribution is ranging from 4, 6 to 10 mm in diameter for earthing. Usually, the most different at all, the least of it is 4 mm. Earthing starts from 4 mm when you are earthing a distribution board, a distribution point. You use 4 mm. On no account are you allowed to use anything less than 4 mm. While when you're earthing home appliances such as our basic socket outlets for our fan, for our dishes, our gas cookers, and whatever, you use 2.5 mm. Now, for a UPS or an inverter that you might likely want to install in your homes, let's say a 1 kV inverter, you could use a 1.5 mm or a 1 mm, depending on the kVA. But ideally, for 1 kVA, you could use 1 millimeter. For 1.5, you could use 1.5. But for 2 to 3 kVA, you could actually use a range of 2.5 to 3 millimeters. But most likely, what you get in the market is 2.5 mm. So you could settle for 2.5 mm. But if you're using anything from 4 to about 5 kVA, you want to make sure that you are using something from around 4 mm and above. So this is basically uh, a basic introduction about just to give you an idea, sorry, of what to choose when it comes to your cabling in your installation. Because the more quality the materials you use, the more reliable and the more efficient these appliances would actually work and function well. So from the meter to a distribution board, it's recommended that you use around 4 to 6 millimeters, 4 to 6 mm, square meters, from the meter to the distribution board. You want to use about 4 to 6 mm. Now, from your distribution board to a switchboard where you then distribute your lighting, or should I say a switch box, you want to use 2.5 mm. Now, this switchboard could also contain maybe a socket outlet. So if you use a 2.5 mm, you see it caters for the socket outlet, because when you're using a switchboard, there will be no much time to make variations. For if you use a 1.5 mm, then you are risking the socket outlet, there is very likely possibility that they might be bonds. So from the switch port to the lightning points, you use 1.5 or 1 mm. Now from another switch port to switch, you use 2.5 mm. And from the distribution point to the socket, you use 4.4 mm. Well, this brings us to the end of this video. Please do not forget to hit the subscription button